one of the reasons I love startups is that there isn't that entrenched bureaucracy. That no matter who you are, if you've got a good idea, you're only one or two steps away from the guy who makes the decision. Is it plagiarizing other people's work and things like that? Which I think is really more important in the pure creative work, in writing and art and things like that.
Where do you see the future of fractional?
Ooh. I really see fractional leadership growing, especially as our economy is changing so quickly. I think that it's a huge opportunity for leaders who are suddenly looking at their 20-year corporate career and going, okay, that's gone now.
Welcome to Oh Frac, the podcast where top fractional leaders share their wins, struggles, and stories from the trenches. Hosted by Adir Ron. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Oh Frac, the podcast where we dive into the world of fractional leadership. I'm your host, Adir Ron, and today I am very delighted to be hosting Tricia.
Hi there. I'm excited to be here.
And excited to have you here, Tricia. So Tricia's path to fractional leadership is, I would say, anything but ordinary. With roots in back-end development and technical writing, Tricia's worn hats ranging from systems engineer to PMO coordinator for the Chicago Transit Authority. She's helped secure networks, coach creative founders, and even founded a soul work coaching studio. Today, through Disentangled Tech, Tricia helps founders cut through the tech chaos with sharp strategy, zero jargon, and a whole lot of heart.
And, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but we'll throw in the author credits there as well. I actually co-authored three books on cybersecurity as well. So that's
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Suppose I ought to update my LinkedIn once in a while, but yeah.
Probably a good idea. Okay, so let's kick it off, Tricia, with an icebreaker question.
Okay.
So you've built code bases, and you've built creative businesses. What's more complex, debugging PHP or coaching founders?
Founders, easily. Usually code does what I tell it to. Most of the time.
Usually.
When
we write the right code. Yes.
If I speak the right language, the computers usually do what I tell them to. And if I follow the threads in a code base, I can usually find the problem. When you're building a business, it's like you're half strategy, half therapist. You really do dig down into the dirt when you're building a business.
Yeah, I can totally relate. And I think so I'm in marketing, but I studied code in high school, and I consider myself a relatively technical person. And the one thing that I always remember about code is that the machine always does exactly and 100% what you told it to do. The problem is that you probably didn't tell it the right thing to do. The problem is not with what the machine is executing, is with what you input into the machine.
Yes. Absolutely.
I totally agree that in contrast, people do not work the same way. Regardless of what I would tell a founder, again, from the marketing perspective, they would not go and do 100% of what I do exactly how I say it.
Right.
So the human factor is always a gambit, but always an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one of the very first computer science lessons I had, probably in elementary school, when they were teaching us this lesson, actually, they put all of us in a room, and this was back in the 80s, so, I'm dating myself, but anyway. So they had like a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and a jar of jelly. And they put us in pairs, and they said, okay, One of you is the coder, one of you is the computer. And the coder had to tell the computer how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the kid that was the computer could only do exactly what the coder told them to do. And it was, I mean, by 5 minutes in, we were all on the floor giggling because, you know, we would say, okay, take a piece of bread. And, well, you hadn't opened the package of bread yet. And, you know, and that lesson, I mean, I must have been like 8 years old. And that lesson stuck with me because it was so experiential. And, you know, and so I just remembered that so clearly of, okay, wait. And come to think of it, that lesson not only informed my future career as a programmer, but also my interactions with other people. It's like, okay, I can't assume you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. We're always stuck in our own head, and we think we know what we're saying, but we never really know how the other side perceives what we're saying.
Right. It's also why in writing they say, you know, you can never edit your own stuff because you know what it's supposed to say. Whereas if you hand it to a complete stranger, they're like, this makes no sense. You skipped like 3 steps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about about you, about your journey, and I like to call this "How the frack did you get here?"
So yeah, I started my career in the early 2000s as a web application developer. That was back in the day when high tech meant hooking up a website to a database, and you know that was pretty cool. And did that for about 4 years. And in 2004, I kind of had this moment where I realized that I was bored out of my mind, spending, you know, all day long in this cubicle surrounded by tech bros who, you know, and it's like on one hand, they were like explaining stupid stuff. And I'm going, dude, I'm the smartest person in the room and we all know it. Leave me alone. And I was doing all of the documentation for our team because I knew that if I didn't write this stuff down, if I had to come back to that code in 6 months, I wasn't going to remember what it did. And so for me, it was like just self-preservation. And you know, I have a dual degree in computer science and creative writing, so it was like, okay, this is easy, I'll just do it. And then at one point, there was a Friday evening, and I was driving home from work, and my husband, who's also in tech, we actually met in a computer science class, which was adorable. But anyway.
Very much.
Yeah, and you know, he's talking about, oh yeah, you know, we solved this problem, and we did this, and we did that, and about halfway through the call, you know, he's like, so what'd you do today? I'm like, and it was one of those moments where mouth engages before brain. And I just said, you know what? It's 5 o'clock. I'm not a programmer anymore. I don't want to talk about it. And I realized, wait a minute. If I don't care enough about the work I'm doing to talk about it on the way home, then what am I doing with my life, you know? Yeah. And at that point, I had 2 little ones. They were like 2 years old and 6 months old or something like that. And I was pregnant with number 3. And just realized that I didn't want to do this. And so started kind of looking around and going, okay, what else can I do with my life? And decided that I was kind of working 2 jobs. I was a programmer and I was a tech writer. And I thought, you know what? If I just freelance, I can work from home, sitting on the floor with my kids, and just do one job and get paid for it. Cool.
Yeah.
And, you know, this was long before remote work was a thing. And so, started doing, you know, copywriting, building websites, you know, kind of just going through all of these different things. And because I'm, you know, taking care of a large family and running a business and, you know, doing 3,000 other things, project management really just kind of was a life skill. You know, I wasn't going to survive if I didn't figure out how to go from chaos into some sort of organization. And so I found myself, you know, talking to these founders, these developers about the product, and so that I could document it. And then going, okay, well, have you thought about this? And okay, I had one client where I literally had to introduce the concept of a code freeze as their, freelance tech writer. I mean, I was like the lowest rung on the ladder there. And I was like, okay, dude, I cannot document your software if you're changing it every 3 days.
Yeah.
You have to have a code freeze so that I can go through the stable version and take screenshots and, see how it actually works and, go through step by step every task. And they're like, oh,
that makes sense.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, guys, and so that's really where I started doing a lot of the leadership and the project management and, technical leadership. And it really opened my eyes at that moment to how disorganized and just ad hoc a lot of these things were. And so, kind of moved on from them and really focused in on the project management and was doing a lot of consulting and coaching with creative business owners and creative founders. I'm also an artist. You can see this is one of my early paintings that I just love. And, for me, it's always been about, building a business is a creative act, right? You're taking an idea and you're making it real. And so I've always been really passionate about that and about helping, especially women, build businesses because of the freedom that it's given me to, really live life on my own terms. And so I did that for a really long time. And then a few years ago, this opportunity with Chicago Transit Authority kind of fell into my lap. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to step away from my own business for a minute, take a breather. I was burned out. And so I took this job. And originally my job was to manage their IT contracts. Yeah, I don't know why they called it tech writer, but they did. And so, but I was basically in charge of this 7-figure portfolio of IT vendors. And so I learned a lot there. And I learned a lot about kind of the other side of business and how a larger organization works. Because I've spent my entire career in startups. And, but there was
such a contrast, right?
It is. It really, really is. Just the mindset and the skills that you need to survive in that environment versus in the startups. And the thing that I really learned was that I didn't like it. I was an awful employee of a large organization because I was sitting there going, okay, you guys are wasting so much time and so much money and so much effort when we could automate this and get this done in 2 days. And I did actually do a lot of that. My manager there was very, very supportive. And when I came to him and said, look, here's this process that's taking 2 weeks of me literally walking into people's office and saying, please, for the love of God, sign this, and hey, so have you signed this yet? And I'm like, I could take 2 days and automate this process. And then I don't have to go and harass grown men to do their homework. And, and so he's like, yeah, sure, fine. Take 2 days, do what you want. And I did. And I implemented this across the IT department, and then was starting to push it into the larger procurement department when I left that position. Because I had this other startup here in Chicago had reached out to me, and they were looking for a fractional director of technology. And I'm like, sure, I'll talk to you. Why not? And so, I talked to them and I'm like, in the first 20 minutes of the conversation, I had a list of 20 things that I could do to improve their business, and I'm like,
I love when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, this sounds like a fun challenge. And so I left CTA and went to that company on a fractional basis. and realized that, yeah, my home is in the startup world. And one of the reasons I love startups is that there isn't that entrenched bureaucracy that no matter who you are, if you've got a good idea, you're only one or two steps away from the guy who makes the decisions. And so, you can really make an impact and you can make things happen. And so I spent about 8 months there with that client. And I took them from 2 guys as their entire tech department to a team of 8 full-time developers. And
that's a nice
really, yeah. And it was really, really nice because I was able to implement that transition from like a couple of cowboys who were literally there were 2 guys and nobody had a clue what they were doing. And the stories I could tell you, but anyway, and I'm not going to mention their name or the name of the company because, they were wonderful guys. Really good friends with them to this day, even though I'm not working with them anymore. But it was an absolute dumpster fire. And, I'm really proud of the fact that when I left, there were really solid systems in place. Everybody knew what was going on, who was doing what, and, in the, 2 months where I was actually tracking productivity data, we increased productivity by 150%. I mean, that's nice. Huge, right?
In 2 months, that's quite.
In 2 months, yes. Yeah. Which, on one hand, I would love to say it's because I'm brilliant. On the other hand, it also shows you how much growth was, right there. There was so much low-hanging fruit. So that was really, really fun. And so this January, got the phone call that you always get when you work with, not always, but you kind of always have that expectation in the back of your head when you work with a startup. I got a phone call from the CEO and he said, basically, look, revenues weren't where we expected them to be. We just can't afford to keep you on. I'm like, okay, that's how it is. And
it's part of the risk.
And that's part of the risk that you run with startups. Although one thing that I've learned over the years, because, like I said, my husband and I are both in IT. He's the exact opposite of me. I mean, he is like Mr. Corporate. He wants to go to work at 8:30, be done at 4, and that's it. Collect, do his job, collect his paycheck, he's done. And yet over the years, what I've noticed and what I've understood is that having that corporate job, we all kind of learned through osmosis that, you want a good, stable corporate job. And that's a myth. It's not true. Look at what's happening in the government right now, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, my mother was a government employee. She worked for the Forest Service for 20 years. And, at that time, if you got hired by the government, you had a job for life. You had to really screw up to get let go from a government job. And, and now we're seeing that, no, that job security is a myth. And so to me, the way I see startups is, and especially fractional leadership, is that I actually have a more stable job than my husband does because, if let's say my biggest client goes under tomorrow, I have 4 more. I'm still going to pay the bills. I might have to, ramp up a little bit, go and try and do some more outreach and pull in a couple more clients, but I'm never going to have that pit of the stomach. Oh God, what am I going to do now?
Right.
Whereas if you get laid off from a corporate job, there's your entire income gone.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of my story. Once when I got that phone call, I kind of knew that I had done what I needed to do at that company. So I was already starting to think about, okay, what's my next step? And, so I kind of relaunched Disentangled Tech with this renewed emphasis on fractional leadership. And one of the big changes that I've made in the business is previously I really loved working with early stage startups. And I still do. I mean, I am super passionate about taking it from idea stage to, launch.
Yeah.
But I've also realized that there's a tiered reality here where I can't afford to work one-on-one with those founders because they can't afford to work with me. And so I'm working with growth stage startups and implementing those systems that take them out of chaos so that they can grow sustainably. And then I'm actually working on a couple of other projects that are designed to help those early stage startups get to the point where they can work one-on-one with me and afford that fractional leadership. And here we are. And that brings us to today.
And here we are. So that's quite a story.
Yeah.
And I love how your career trajectory has been one thing and then another, and how it kind of converges together. But I'm kind of wondering where so really going back to the beginning of your story.
Yeah.
You talked about having dual degrees and how it's like, to me it seems almost opposites in a way, because it's it's when you typically think of someone in engineering, a CTO, you typically think of someone who's like very, very straightforward thinker, very, very technical, very oriented towards like processes, and
Yes.
it's someone that is not by default a very creative person. And you come from from creative writing, and you're an artist, and like I'm wondering how does that combine? I love that it combines. Exactly.
Yeah.
I can say for myself, I'm on marketing, and in marketing, it's actually considered an advantage if you're both. If you can be, the creative guy that throws up, the fun, out of the box, whimsical, creative briefs, but then you can also open an Excel sheet and pivot table the results and analyze the campaign's performance. Then that's a really like strong suit of combined skills.
Yeah.
But I'm more wondering, in the
what the world is going on in my brain. So,
that's one way to say it. Yes.
Yeah. So, and there's like so many ways I could go with this. So I guess I've always been creative. Like from my earliest memories, I was writing stories, I was drawing, I was, I always wanted to, make something. That was how I entertained myself. And that's still true today. Actually, when you walk into my house, you walk into my studio. I actually have claimed kind of that front room as that's my studio space, and I love that. So when I was, I don't know, like 16, junior in high school, deciding what I was going to major in, where I was going to go to school, blah blah blah, I was talking to my mother one day, and I was telling her, look, I think I really want to major in creative writing. And she said, you know what? That's great. You're very talented, but maybe major in something you can support yourself in. I was like, okay, great. And it was like, at that time, my snotty little teenage brain was like, you can't tell me not to be an artist. But at the same time, it was like, I had seen her struggles. My mother was a poet, and she wrote one book of self-published poetry that I have a copy on my shelf, and it is I have two. I have one on my shelf and I have one in my fire safe because I think, it's one of those things where if my house burned down, it would break my heart to lose it. And so it's
Okay.
right there with my kids' birth certificates. But she didn't have the opportunity to explore that because um, at the time we lived in a very rural community up in Northern California. She had 6 kids in 10 years, and then 11 years later, I came along. So she was
Wow.
very much, yeah, I was, yeah. And so, she was very much a um, traditional housewife for most of her adult life. And then when I was very young, she took this job with the Forest Service. She had actually gotten a degree in accounting when she was young, and which honestly, I think that would destroy my soul. But anyway,
I can
um,
relate.
yeah. And so, the woman that I remember as my mother, um, was a working woman, and she, did all of these things because she needed to have that independence. And that's what she wanted from me, was to not have my life circumstances depend on, the whims of anyone else. And I respect that from her. And so I did. I majored in computer science. Um, Freshman year of college, met this guy. Um, 4 kids and a mortgage later, here we are. But anyway, that's a whole different story. And so long story short, I was always that smart kid. I was always the kid that got the good grades, did, was in, led every club I joined, all of this stuff. And then freshman year of college, I failed, like really failed for the first time in my life. I literally failed out of college. Now, the fact that
Wow.
I, had met my first serious boyfriend and he was a lot more interesting than my classes, I mean, may have
Yeah.
had something to do with it.
Probably.
Turns out that if you want to do well in school, going to classes is a really good place to start. Doing your homework, things like that. Anyway, so, in order to be readmitted, I had to write this letter to the admissions office explaining what I was going to do differently and how I was going to be successful. And so I spent that summer really, really doing a lot of soul searching. And I thought, okay, um, and the conclusion I came to was, okay, I'm going to double major. I'm going to keep computer science because I'd always been good at tech. I'd always been, for me, programming was a creative act. It was another expression of creativity because, again, you're taking an idea and you're making it real. You're making it
A
into something.
reality.
Yeah, yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm going to double major. And my thought process was, okay, if I'm interested in half my classes, I'll go to all of them, even the boring ones. And
Okay.
it worked. I actually graduated cum laude with honors and had a 4.0 my last year. So I grew up a lot and I learned a lot. And yeah, so that's kind of how I combined the two, but also kind of used the creativity to support the tech. And really what I learned was that um, like I said, when you're writing code, it's I see it's a different form of poetry because it's an imperfect way of describing an idea. And so, and you're kind of starting from a blank page, and then you work on it, and then there's a thing that you can't hold it in your hand, but you can see it on your screen, and it does things. And so that was always really exciting for me. And then, of course, um, kind of going into where I am now, where I'm not doing as much development. I'm more pulling in existing tools and integrating them, and but it's still creative because it's problem solving. And really, that's all creativity is. It's problem solving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wondering, gonna go a bit off script here for a second. I'm wondering how, I totally relate with, how coding is creative work in essence, and
Hmm.
you're taking an idea and you're materializing it into something,
Yeah.
maybe not physical, but it's still something.
Yeah.
Wondering what's your take on vibe coding and all of the new AI platforms that help you, just write a prompt and get something off the air. What's your take on that and from a creativity perspective?
Sure. So, as far as like coding goes, there are some really, really nice AI code assistants that I think are just absolutely brilliant. I love them because, for example, GitHub's Copilot. There's a lot of those tools out there because really the creative act is not in knowing syntax, right? The creative act is in imagining a result and then working backwards to figure out how to implement it. And so I am a huge proponent of letting the computer do as much work as I can make it do so that I don't have to do the boring stuff. I get bored really easily, and I think that's true of a lot of creatives. I would much rather spend my time and energy coming up with crazy new ideas and then let somebody else, like the computer, do all the busy work. And so, as far as that goes, I'm all for it. With the caveat that you can't trust it completely. You have to check its work. I have had I use AI in a lot of different ways in my business. But I tend to use it as a crappy first draft.
Okay.
Yeah, that was always the thing that we did in my writing classes was, just get a crappy first draft done because you can't edit something that's not on paper. Once it's on paper, you can work with it. And so that's how I use AI. Or for example, I was working on an integration the other day and it was in Python. Well, I've not used Python. Is it that, I can read it because it's very, very similar to the 15 other languages that I've used over the years. But I would spend 3 hours fighting with the code because I got the syntax wrong or, there's this little tiny tweaks that Python does that PHP doesn't. And it would just be frustrating and tedious and annoying. So what I did was I wrote pseudocode and fed it to the AI and said, here, spit this out in Python. So that tends to be how I use it. And then of course I, went through and double checked that yes, this actually does what I want it to do and it's not doing anything crazy.
Yeah.
So for that, especially in coding, I really don't have a problem with it. As long as you're using it, reasonably. I tend to think of it as my like super junior developer.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. And like
very eager junior developer.
Yes, exactly. And there are, of course, ethical considerations in terms of like, is it plagiarizing other people's work and things like that? Which I think is really more important in the pure creative work, in writing and art and things like that. Because with code, it's like, it's just code. The work that you've put in is in your design, in your algorithm, in your not necessarily in your implementation, and that's where the AI is coming in. So,
I agree. Kind of segueing from that. Do you feel a difference working with founders who are technical versus founders who are non-technical?
Definitely. Oh yeah. And, there are challenges in both places. When I'm working with a non-technical founder, it's easier in some ways because they will tell me, okay, these are my pain points. These are my problems. This is what I'm struggling with. I had a conversation with a potential client yesterday, actually, who basically got on the phone and said, look, I am spending 30 hours on this manual process. Is there anything I can do? And I'm like, oh yeah, we just have to put this and this and this together and you're fine. It'll take, it'll be automated and they'll send you a dashboard every 2 days. And he's just looked at me like, really? Oh, that'd be great, And it's like, I feel like I need a little wizard hat.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, because to a non-technical founder or person, it's, what I do is magic. And that's always fun. And it's great because, we can just cut through all of the business, all the red tape and be like, yeah, I can solve your problem. I'll send you a quote. And it's easy. When I'm working with technical people, though, on one hand, they tend to have their own opinions, which we all do, and their own favorite ecosystems and tools and, well, that's great, but I want it over here and things like that. And so it's a little more, you kind of have to make a few more compromises because I don't just get to put my favorite tools in place. I have to, take their preferences into consideration. But at the same time, the conversation tends to go higher faster because they already have, we're starting here instead of starting here. And so, I can go in and they're going to tell me, okay, look, I know that, for this conversation I had yesterday, they can tell me, look, I know there's a way to automate this data analysis stuff. Should we use Tableau, Splunk, or BI? And I can then sit there and go, okay, well, here's what BI is good for. Splunk is great for unstructured data, and you're working with Excel spreadsheets, so we probably ought to go with Tableau. And so it's like, it's a different level of conversation. And a lot of times we will end up riffing off each other, especially if we get into like the code. And they'll be like, well, but what if we built it this way? And what if we did this? And then it's like, it's sort of a creative brainstorming. So that's always fun.
Okay. So let's segue that into my next question.
Okay.
Which is, what's your one fracked up moment?
Oh boy.
In your
just
career?
One? Only one.
One.
There have been many.
Like in any good career. But try to think of one where you're like,
oh my gosh,
okay.
Where I just royally fracked up, huh?
And how you tidied up after it, yes.
Yes, actually. So this was actually very, very early on. I was actually still in college at the time. I was the system admin for the Center for Asynchronous Learning at my university, which back in the 90s meant distance learning.
Okay.
So we were, I was basically handed a lab and said, hey, we want to do distance learning with, so I went to Bradley in Peoria here in Illinois, and they wanted to do a semester-long history course with the University of Moscow.
Okay.
And this was in like 97, 98, something like that. So that was like, okay. And they basically they said, here, figure it out and make it happen. And I went, okay, I can do that. Sure. And so, I'm sitting there this one afternoon on the server, and I don't even remember what I was working on, trying to fix something. And it was getting late. Some friends came by and like, dude, if you want to get dinner, we better go because the cafeteria is going to close. I'm like, oh, crap. Okay. And so, and if you have tech people listening, they're going to, this is going to make their eyes bleed, but I moved the user directory from one hard drive to another. So I just did, move/user to wherever it was. And then I logged off because, of course, you log off the server when you leave the lab. and came back after dinner and went to log back on, and I had blue screened the server.
Because you can't log in because now it's not
Because
where
the
it
user
should
directory
be.
wasn't there anymore. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, what am I going to do? And, you know, because I can't even log into the damn thing to fix it. And so I ended up calling 2 or 3 friends that, and we spent probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 hours. I don't even remember what time it was when we left. But we had to reinstall the server from floppies to
Wow.
get it. Yeah, yeah. And thank God I had just taken a backup like the day before or something on floppies. So it was like, you know, we figured it out. But that was probably the worst panic of my career, was that moment when it was like, I knew, like, the minute I tried to log in and like it didn't even bring up a login screen. And I'm like, oh crap, I know what I did. How do I fix this? You know?
Yeah.
And
but it's great that that first thought was, I know what I did. It's not like,
yes.
oh no, what's going on? It's like, you're already starting at a much better place. You're like, I know where I fracked up.
Oh yeah.
Now
I knew exactly what I had done. And, you know, and I'm sitting here going, okay, you know, and I took about 10 minutes of staring at it and panicking, going, okay, how am I going to get on the server? Because I knew if I could get on the server, it was a stupid easy fix. I literally just had to put the directory back. And had I not logged off...
It's right there.
It's right there. Yeah, and if I hadn't logged off, I'd have been fine. Because I would have finished what I was doing and, you know, it would have been fine. But, you know, it was just stupid timing. And I got distracted and, yeah. And so, you know, luckily I had some friends that I could call and who were, you know, we had a friend who was actually working as a system admin for a local tech company. And so, you know, he was a little bit more knowledgeable on this type of server than I was. And I mean, and this was back in the day when you really had the cave troll sysadmin. I mean, this guy had the social skills of a frog, but he knew his tech. So I put up with him.
At least that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was like, that was a really long night, but got it fixed. Yeah. Yeah, so that was probably the worst moment of my career.
Okay,
but I did learn. You know, I think I've been a lot more careful, and sometimes a little too careful at times. You know, but that moment of panic, it was like, yeah, I'm never doing that again.
Yes, I can relate on different places on my career where I had those similar, oh my gosh, what did I just do moments. And I think the beauty of it is that you learn from every single one.
Oh, yeah.
And you never do the same mistake again. You'll do another mistake, but you know, and that's okay, but you will never do that same mistake again, ever.
It's like I tell my kids, you know, look, you're going to do stupid things. You are going to make really dumb mistakes. All I ask is that you make your own mistakes and don't do any of the stupid stuff that your dad and I have done. And I figure if they, you know, if they avoid the stupid stuff that we did when we were their age, then that takes out about 90% of the stupid stuff they can do. You know, so
it's true, but you know, at the end of the day, they have to run their own course, and I think there will be a lot of mistakes that our kids do that we did as well.
Exactly.
You just can't teach them to avoid it. They have to learn it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, as long as they don't do anything permanent, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need the details.
Sometimes we don't. Yes. Okay, so let's switch gears and do a bit of a quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions, and let's see what comes to mind. So fact or fiction, or should I say frac or fiction? Um, Fractional CTOs are only great for early stage startups.
Fiction.
Okay.
Absolutely. Um, because I have done both full-time and fractional, and I've seen other people in that position. And until you get to a very, high level, and even if when you do, at least for myself, there's only about 20 hours a week worth of actual heads down work. And the rest of it is like meetings and chatting with people and, kind of stuff that, yeah, this could be a Slack conversation while I'm doing something else.
Yes.
But then again, I get bored easily, so your mileage may vary.
Okay. What's the one tool in your toolkit that you swear by?
ClickUp. That is the project management tool that I am using right now. I've played with all of them. What I love about it is that it kind of keeps everything about whatever you're doing all kind of in one place. And I love ecosystems. I love it when everything's kind of just all in one place. And so I literally run my household on ClickUp.
This episode is not yet sponsored by ClickUp, but maybe it will
be. Right. No, and there are other tools that do a very similar thing. It's really about like what interface is intuitive to you. I could give you a list of 7 others that do exactly the same thing in a very similar way. That's just the one that I like the interface of.
Okay. What's the definition of a dream client for you, and and in contrast, what's a nightmare client?
Oh boy. For me, a dream client is somebody who is, a founder who is very driven, who is very mission driven, who has an impact that they want to make, and that really lets me kind of come in and do what I'm really, really good at, and who is a partner, who really wants to partner with me to so that I can then build their tech and their infrastructure and their systems so that they can go out on stage and shine. I'm really good at the back end, Nightmare client is a non-technical client who thinks they know tech. Because, they tend to be really micromanagey. They tend to question every decision I make. And the type of client who, instead of is really focused on their goals and what they want to do, is, I've got a huge patience for ADD people because I'm ADD too. But when you are jumping from goal to goal to goal to goal, it's like, dude, I'm going to get whiplash. Chill out. Let's get one thing done before you decide you want to pivot to 7 others.
Okay. I think that's a great definition of a nightmare client for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've worked with both, so.
we all have. Yes.
We all have. Yeah.
Yes. Where do you see the future of fractional?
Ooh. I really see fractional leadership growing, especially as our economy is changing so quickly. I think that it's a huge opportunity for leaders who are suddenly looking at their 20-year corporate career and going, okay, that's gone now. But who still have so much to teach and so much to give. And, like I said earlier, I think it's a great way to diversify your career. And I also think it's wonderful because, we're seeing so many people going, you know what? I've been looking for a job. I've seen people looking for a job for 2 years. And
yeah, that's
part of me is going, how in the world are you surviving without a job for 2 years? You know?
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what am I missing here? You know, and for me, and again, I'm coming from the background I do, my gut instinct is, okay, at some point you look at the writing on the wall and going, okay, this isn't in the cards right now. So I'm going to go and start my business. I'm going to go do something that I'm really, really good at and get 3 or 4 clients. And so for those people, I think that fractional leadership is an absolute godsend, because all of a sudden you get the benefit of, you know, people who've got, you know, millions and millions of dollars to do their startup and can hire, you know, a whole C-suite. You get that same benefit, but at a much different economic level. And so I see it as really leveling that playing field. And that's something I'm really excited about.
Same here.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my last question for today. If you could give one piece of advice to someone, not necessarily a CTO, who's, you know, considering, should I go fractional?
Sure.
What would that advice be?
Sure. So, my advice would be to really take some time and, you know, maybe a couple of days where you literally just close yourself in a room and figure out what is like the one core thing that you are really, really good at, that you can walk into a business and make an impact, like day one. Because I've seen a lot, and I've coached a lot of people who are considering leaving corporate to do freelancing or consulting or now fractional work. And, you know, they're like, well, this is what I did for my corporate job, so I could just kind of do that, right? It's like, no. You know, it's not a one-to-one. You have to really narrow down, what is the impact that you make? What do you do? What is your work? And then, you know, like you said, who are the people that you want to do that work for? And, you know, in marketing, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know, you've got to find your people, your niche. I had a coach who was early in my career who made it really, really clear, because she told me, okay, look, because I was giving her this laundry list of stuff that I can do. Because I could rattle off 10 different things that I can do right now. And she's like, no, that's too much. People's eyes are going to glaze over, you know? And I'm like, well, I can do this for anybody, you know? And she's like, no, because if I am, you know, if I meet you at a networking event and you tell me I can do programming or system admin or systems integration or project management or creative writing or tech writing or blah, 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 for anybody, who comes to mind? Your mind is blank. You're gone. But if I tell you that I help growth stage founders create calm out of the chaos of their disjointed systems, now you have just thought of 3 different people who need to talk to me. So that's really my...
that's a great one-liner. Are you sure you're not also doing marketing?
I'm not. You know, and that's the other thing, is that you have to really wrap your head around and accept the fact that once you own a business, and as a fractional, you own a business, you're in marketing.
Amen.
You're in marketing and sales. Welcome to it, honey. You know? And I had a hard time with that for a long time.
And in operations and in project management and multiple projects.
Yeah. Yes. I swear one of these days I'm going to get a hat rack in my office here. And I'm just going to have, you know, I'm just going to label it, you know, all these different hats.
No.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Now I am a salesperson.
Yeah. And, you know, you have to figure that stuff out. Because if you think that you're going to be able to just kind of walk in as you did with the same mindset that you did as an employee, you're never going to get anywhere.
Okay, I think that's a great piece of advice. And I think that's a great place to wrap up this episode as well. So thank you very, very much, Tricia. It's been a pleasure having you here today. And for those who would love to keep in touch, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is disentangledtech.com. And there's a little
And if
link.
you're a founder that needs help disentangling their tech.
Yes, there is a little link right there on the front page to book a call with me. One of the best parts of my day is when I get to talk to founders. And I actually have a program that I am beta testing right now. So, where, instead of coming in for like a 6-month, 8-month engagement to kind of overhaul everything, what I've been hearing from a lot of my potential clients is that, look, I'm not ready for that. And so, I've got this new program, called Get Your Tech Together, and I will let your imagination go, where we sit down for a 90-minute tech coaching session and really get to and really unravel where all of the fires in your business are. And then my team puts together a really, really comprehensive step-by-step roadmap with recommendations for, okay, here are, the things that you need to do this week. And then here are the things that maybe you can do next month. And then in 6 months, to start to, and it's literally the same roadmap that I would follow if I was walking into your business as a fractional. And so, you get all my secrets, and then, we meet again, to kind of go over it and talk it through and make sure that, if you've got any questions, if, you look at it and go, okay, well, I can't do this because of reasons. Okay, well, let's figure out, let's revise it on the fly and figure out how to make it work for you. So that's kind of a program that I am soft launching, kind of beta. I sent it out to a handful of my contacts yesterday. So you're the first to hear it publicly. And so if any of your listeners are interested in that, I would be happy to get on a call and give them the link to the page on my website. It's not linked anywhere. It's actually a hidden page on my website because I haven't announced it publicly. And go from there.
Awesome. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting or relevant to any of our viewers or listeners, go to disentangledtech.com and book a call with Tricia.
Yeah.
So that's it for us today. And thank you for chiming in, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share, like, follow, tweet, do all the things that people do. And again, thank you very much, Tricia, for joining us today. And
I had a great time. It was great to talk to you. All right. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.